All right. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing today?
Good morning.
Stack of papers right here. Well, comes in and wants a handout. So, did anyone here get a chance to join us Wednesday evening when we started playing around and exploring? I think mostly new faces, which is great. So, thanks for coming by for us. For the first time, I'm up here not talking about Guatemala. I'm talking about prayer practices, which is a fun change of pace for me, because the thing that really drove me into my faith was experiences of more off the beaten path prayer. I had grown up Catholic, and I had learned to say my Hail Marys and my Our Fathers, and I knew I had to say a lot of them when I went to confession. And that never really resonated with me as a way of connecting with God. And when I was in high school, I started a bit of wandering. I explored some Buddhist practices, some Taoist practices, some Islamic traditions, and eventually found my way back to Christianity. But what I found kind of exploring was this deep meditative contemplative tradition that's present in a lot of world religions and also in Christianity, but we tend to forget about it. And when I had come to learn that these practices that I was cherishing in more Eastern traditions were also within my own Christian home base, I really dove heavily into them, and it gave me a renewed sense of purpose and all of that. I have some more handouts sitting here on the chair if anyone coming in and wants a handout. But today specifically, my topic is movement prayer, which I think is one of the more unusual prayer practices from a Christian point of view, though it is present within our culture. I have a pretty rough definition on our handout here, that movement prayer is connecting with God through our physical movement. It typically comes in the form of rhythmic, repetitive movement that can often, but not always, be paired with our breath. And it's meant to bring us into this calm, meditative, relaxed state that can help us rest into God. I equate it to a snow globe. We've all used a snow globe before, right? If you take a snow globe and you shake it up, what happens? All little snowflakes are floating everywhere around. And this is what our minds and spirits and hearts are like often when we come to prayer. And if we really want to get into that space where we can let God in, we need to stop shaking the snow globe. We need to let all the little things floating around settle to the bottom so we can clearly have that connection and relationship with God without meeting. I have to leave in 20 minutes. My kid needs to be fed. I've got 7 things going on over here. And oh my gosh, I'm cooking on the stove right here. We need to let all of that go to just be in that space with God. And so movement prayer is a really deeply religious practice, spanning religious traditions, ecumenically within Christianity and interfaith around the world. Within Christianity, we have a number of really important traditional examples of this that I think, again, are not commonly known in our modern church context. And perhaps the most common expression of movement prayer in the Christian tradition is the practice of the labyrinth. Has anyone seen a labyrinth before? Yeah. A number of people. Can anyone tell us, what is a labyrinth in your experience? What does it look like? I can talk about it too, that's fine. It's my presentation after all. So the labyrinth tradition dates back probably to the 4th century. The oldest one we know of is from the Basilica of Saint Reparatus in Orleansville, Algeria in Africa. And the labyrinth is a giant maze, basically, that's built into the floor of a cathedral. And taking inspiration from like the Greek traditions of the labyrinth, and you hear stories about the labyrinth and the Minotaur and all of that, those labyrinths, there weren't a way out. In these labyrinths, there is a clear path into the center, and then a clear path that you follow back out. And as we begin the labyrinth, it might only be a space as big as this carpet. One would follow the path trained into it and take their time very slowly as we wander in toward the center of our hearts and our spirits, around the twists and turns, taking ourselves deeply into this space in the center where God is waiting for us. And then in the center of the labyrinth, we would take a little bit of time here. It could be a few seconds, it could be a few minutes, to just be fully in this central space with God. And then when we're ready, when our spirit has stirred us properly, we begin walking out of the labyrinth, but maintaining that connection, taking God we found in the center out with us through the twists and turns of our lives and spiritual journeys, and back out into our regular lives. Now, labyrinths are all over the place. We can find tons of beautiful examples in old cathedrals around Europe and Northern Africa. And these days, as the practice has gotten resurrected, we'll often see these giant chart printed labyrinths. They're a whole lot cheaper to make and easier to transport that way. But I've been really encouraged to see that this practice, especially within Lutheran camping, is coming out a lot and has really been resonating with a lot of young people as a way to simply wander with God. Because, we talk in Lent about Jesus being lost in the wilderness and spending those 40 days wrestling with temptation and Satan. The labyrinth practice really represents that in a lot of ways as we wander through the wilderness and have God accompany us along that journey. Another really common Christian example of movement prayer is that of liturgical dance. And in the Bible, we actually have a lot of examples of this, mostly in the Old Testament. The two examples that most people tend to remember are that of Miriam, the sister of Aaron, upon the exodus of Egypt after they crossed the Red Sea. Miriam leads many of the women in dance and song, praising God. Probably our first example of dancing as a form of prayer practice. And again, we have countless examples of David, specifically in 2 Samuel. He dances a lot in front of the Ark of the Covenant, and he tells those who are maybe criticizing him of it, like, how dare you tell me not to dance in joy in front of my God? And so dating back to our earliest days, it's a way that people have moved their bodies as a form of praise for God. In the 70s, this really started resurging as a more traditional prayer practice. So not that long ago, especially within charismatic movements and Pentecostal movements of Christianity. Our Pentecostal brothers and sisters do a whole lot of this, and it typically involves music and movement. It could be to a hymn or to a psalm or something like that. But the dance practices can be creative, they can be modern, they can be traditional. But nonetheless, it's a way that we in Christianity have moved our bodies as a form of prayer. And lastly, perhaps most well-known, though maybe not commonly thought of as a movement prayer discipline, would be the act of going on a pilgrimage. Has anyone here done a pilgrimage before? Where have you gone, Beverly?
Santiago. Well,
Camino de Santiago? Cool. What about you? Where have you gone?
Santiago.
Santiago also? So, where have you gone, Rachel?
I wandered around West Texas till I found a church out in the desert. So it was a literal pilgrimage.
Yeah, no destination in
No,
mind. You
yeah.
just found where you were going. So pilgrimage dates back more than 1,500 years, probably to the 300s, the early formations of the church. It's the practice of going from where you live to a religious site to either view a relic or be in this holy space with God. But most people who do a pilgrimage at the end of this process will tell you it's not about the destination. It's about all the time and prayer you get with God in that long journey there. Both folks over here mentioned the Camino de Santiago, and how far on that trail did you go?
Just the last 100 miles.
Okay.
So we didn't start.
So the Camino de Santiago can take you months if you want. It can start in France and it runs all the way through to the Church of St. James in Spain. And it's many pilgrims will walk what? 15, 20 miles a day, depending on the day, stopping at little hostels, connecting with pilgrims around the way. And it's a really embodied spiritual practice because one, you're physically moving all whole day. Your purpose for this movement is to move closer to God. And so is that practice of prayer simply with every step you take, especially as you get to that 12th or 13th or 14th mile of the day. And you have to have that little motivation and reminder, why am I doing this? And then at the same time, as pilgrims gather at the various hostels and inns, it's a chance to connect with other members of our faith on a similar journey and understand what motivates you to drop everything, to get up and move for a month or two on a journey of magnitude to be in deeper relationship with God. So these are the common Christian practices I've identified as forms of movement prayer. I'm certain there are others out there. But I want to take a moment now and step to a more interfaith perspective, because especially in other religious traditions, we see a vast array of different movement prayer that are complementary to Christian practice and have also found their way kind of sneaking into a variety of Christian tradition. I do want to point out that a lot of these other practices don't necessarily need to be co-opted to be Christian. You don't need to do yoga and chant the Psalms to connect with God. God is in that practice regardless. But simply by seeing how our neighbors and brothers and sisters who are journeying toward God in whatever other ways they journey to God, make that journey, we can learn quite a lot to enhance our own prayer life and practice. So the first practice I want to talk about here is yoga, because it's probably the one where most of us practice yoga or some version of it. Whether it's at your, sweat yoga studio or at the Y or something like that, yoga has become a really, really popular practice. But I think many of us forget the depth of tradition that can be found there. The earliest known writings of yoga date to about 1000 BCE. It's traditionally a Hindu practice, though it's spread into Buddhism and Jainism as well as a form of religious expression. And the goal of yoga through postural practice, through stretching, through breathing is first to still the mind, to release the tension in the body. And through that meditative state of stilling our minds and opening ourselves up literally, physically, we open ourselves up spiritually as well and create space to commune with God. It has a variety of practices, from staying in one posture for 10 minutes at a time. You imagine your 10-minute down dog as you relax deeper and deeper into that space with each breath, to the more common vinyasa flows you might find in a yoga class. But each of these, again, serve the same purpose. We're putting ourselves in what scientists would call a default mode network space, where through our movement and our breath coordinated together, we're not able to think about the other distractions of the world. It gives a chance for that snow globe to settle and a chance for God to start seeping in to all of those spaces. Another kind of Abrahamic tradition that I think is really fascinating in the realm of movement prayer is the practice of whirling. It's a Sufi tradition. Has anyone heard of this one before?
Yeah.
The famed whirling dervishes, exactly. And this practice, again, relatively old. It's been around since the 13th century. A lot of people credit the poet Rumi as one of the original whirling dervishes. And I'm not going to demonstrate much of this, I'm going to fall over. But keeping one foot in place and rapidly moving the other foot around while reciting traditional verses from the Quran, these dervishes will spin for 30 minutes to an hour, going increasingly quickly to bring themselves almost to the state of ecstatic movement. And in that ecstasy is where the connection and the prayer to God tends to happen. Ecstasy is not traditionally, I think, a word we associate with prayer practice, but we have a number of Christian saints also, who's the ecstasy of Saint Teresa, a common sculpture that we've seen paintings and images of, but that prayer doesn't necessarily always have to be completely silent and still, that there's also space for God in those moments of joy and ecstatic twirling, if you will. Practice that one at your own risk, and maybe with some pads around. Within Eastern traditions, for thousands of years, the practice of Taoist circle walking is similar to the practice of whirling, where simply you begin walking in a circle around and around and around and around. And again, through the rhythmic spiraling action, through the slowing down of our breath in this space, from this feeling of spiraling inward toward the center of our circle, very similar to our practice of the labyrinth, we find God at the center of everything. we still our minds, we relax our bodies, we take out the distraction through the movement, and in this practice, again, we get to connect with God. And then the last one I have here is Qigong, which is what we're gonna play with a little bit. When I was in my early teens, I got involved in Tai Chi and Qigong practice, and it was kind of my gateway into more diverse spiritual and prayer practices. Qigong's been around for 3,000 years. It has roots in Buddhism, in Taoism, in Confucianism, and in scholarly practice, with varying aims of simply maintaining our health and breathing better to forming those deep spiritual connections. The practices we're going to do are very simple. They involve a few arm movements and some coordinated breath, but you can go into very deep meditative practices, trying to control how the flows of energy work in your body as a way of eventually reaching enlightenment from a more Eastern sense of that word. What I want to stress before we go into our own practices, though, is that these are not the only ways to move and pray. Where I'm from in Pennsylvania and where I went to seminary in Gettysburg, pretty outdoorsy group of people. We have a lot of natural beauty around. There were battlefields to hike through Gettysburg and mountains and hills and things like that. And I had so many classmates who are like, can't sit still and meditate, it drives me crazy. But I find God when I am out on the trail walking. And so I want to lift that up as a simple spiritual movement practice. If you are the type who just likes to run, and in that space of running, you feel that connection with something bigger. If you have a person that likes to walk, and simply through that brisk movement or connection to nature out on the trail, you feel the presence of God. These are valid forms of prayer practice, because prayer at the end of the day comes down to our intention. If I'm walking in the woods looking at my phone and talking to my friend, I'm not praying. But if I am intentional in the woods, being mindful of the steps, appreciating the sound of creation happening around me, and recognizing God's majesty in these spaces, I'm 100% engaging in a practice of prayer. And so as we explore these disciplines over the course of Lent, this is the big thing I want to encourage, is prayer takes 1,000 different forms. And for each and every one of us to find that way that we uniquely connect with God, well, God delights in that, and our relationship with God deepens as a result. So I'm going to invite everyone to stand up, though. We can put the papers down, find a little bit of space. And maybe an arm between you and your neighbor. Perfect. Can everyone more or less see me? I get a chair down here with a timer on, so I don't keep you moving forever. But we're going to start with a few really simple practices. We're going to stay with each movement for a minute or two. You're going to find some that you really like. There might be a few you're not crazy about. That's fine. And if at any point any movement feels uncomfortable, you're welcome to pause and return to your breath, or you're welcome to sit and do these movements as well. So our first movement's really simple. We're gonna do a little bit of spinal cord breathing. We're gonna take a breath in, we're gonna stretch up like we're getting out of bed. We're gonna exhale, we're gonna curl in and round our spine. Breathing in, we open. And breathing out, we close. For all of these practices, I'm going to talk a little bit, but I'm going to encourage you to go at your own pace. Some of us breathe very deep and slow. Some of us breathe a little bit faster. And the goal here is to move at the pace of your breath. You may find with each movement, as we do it for a little bit, that you start going slower. That your breath deepens, that your movement expands. These are all very good things. As your lung capacity increases through each breath, by all means, let the movements take a little bit longer. If they don't take longer, that's fine too. Simply opening up our bodies for the first time like this can sometimes be enough work as it is. We don't need to worry too much about deepening the breath. And as we engage in this practice, give yourself permission to let go Any other thoughts? Kids are all in Sunday school, we don't need to worry about them. Dishes can't be done right now, and hopefully our phones are all turned off, but we don't need any of that bothering us right now. And just be fully present in the movement of your body. One more just like that. A big deep inhale as we open up. And a nice slow exhale as we close it out. We're gonna stand straight up and let our arms drop to our side. We're gonna take a breath in and the arms are gonna come up above our head. And as we exhale, they're gonna lower down. And just like with the previous movement, we're gonna take this one at our own pace. We breathe deep and slow, allow the movement to be deep and slow. If not, go at whatever pace your breath naturally wants to move. And as we go through this next movement, I'm going to invite you to relax everything your hands have. So as you exhale, let the muscles of your face relax. Muscles in your neck, your chest, your shoulders, through your core, down through your legs to your toes, and all the way out. And with each breath, we can take that relaxation just a little bit deeper. As we breathe and as we move, and pay attention to where we're holding on to tension in our body. We all have those spots due to old movement patterns or old injuries or staring at our computers too long that tend to tense up a little bit. Now I always feel it right between my shoulder blades. And so with each exhale, we give ourselves permission to let that go and create a little bit of space. These movements of our arms up and down will create space in our lungs. Take a little bit of a deeper breath every time. And as we practice rhythmic breathing and moving, you should notice over the weeks and months that we do it, that our lung capacity increases and our diaphragm is a little more active. One more breath just like that, all the way in. Nice and slow, we're gonna let it out. Good. Now with our hands down at the sides, I'm gonna inhale, my arms are gonna come up to the side. And I'm gonna exhale, they're gonna float down. Almost like we're flapping wings, gently flying. Again, we're feeling our lungs expand as our arms lift. We're creating space for breath to come into our lungs. Slow, nice movement is encouraging us into a state of relaxation. Breath, if you were here last week and heard Pastor Sergio's presentation on the Jesus prayer, is also frequently linked with spirituality. And if it's helpful in this practice, you can try that Jesus prayer with each movement here. On the inhale is that mantra, Jesus Christ, Son of God. And on the exhale, have mercy on me. And if that's helpful to bring you to a state of relaxation, by all means, do that. If simply focusing on breath and movement helps you relax, then that's fine too. A little bit of attention to your hips and your tailbone as you start to exhale. A really common place we all tend to hold some tension. As we relax those, we can take the weight of our body into our legs a little bit more. They're big and they're strong and they can support everything up top. So as we relax the upper body, we'll notice a little more strain, a little more engagement of the leg muscles. We're going to inhale our hands up to the side. We're going to turn the palms up as we exhale and bring them in. We're going to inhale, palms down and open. Feel the chest open on the inhale and the back open on the exhale. our whole body starting to move as one with our inhale and our exhale. Breath and movement also go really well together from a spiritual point of view. In Christianity, we talk a lot about breath, but we tend to gloss over it a little bit. In Genesis, we talk about how God breathes the breath of life into Adam. That's what takes Adam from being a mold of clay into a living, breathing person. And in the New Testament, we talk a lot about the Holy Spirit. But for those of you who like your Greek, the word spirit, the word for breath are the same word. And so every time we see the Holy Spirit, we can think about the holy breath, the breath of God moving among us in that holy space. So when we see parts of the New Testament that say, Jesus breathed the Holy Spirit upon his disciple, or the Holy Spirit descended upon Jesus, and visualize the breath of God descending upon Jesus or passing among the disciples. One more time like that, nice and deep, the breath in, the breath out. Now we're going to take this movement and make it a little bit bigger. As I breathe in, I'm going to all the way around like I'm poking myself in the rib. I'm going to exhale in as we open, around as we exhale. Kind of like we're swimming through the water, a big forward stroke. And the hands come through back to us. In we open. Out we exhale. Doing these practices in a church is really unique because you walk into a beautiful church like this, you can kind of feel the holy space as you come in. So as you inhale in all good stuff. Inhale in the holy space and exhale back out into the world. That you might need to sit. You're welcome to sit. Your arms get a little tired, you can always lower them down as well. Help open up a different part of the lungs or deep breathing here. One more breath like this. Then we're going to do one final practice here. We're going to bring our hands in front of us. We're going to inhale one hand out to the side and up. We're going to exhale it down. We're going to bring another hand up to the side. We're going to exhale it down. Just like our first exercises where we were giving our body permission to relax as the hands came down. Imagine here letting all the tension just kind of be pulled straight down with that hand, sinking into your belly and dropping out through your feet, rooting into the ground. One more just like that. Up. Slow down. Ask you to bring both of your hands to your belly. Close your eyes, continue to breathe, and let your body just sway gently back and forth, side to side. Doesn't matter where it wants to go. Kind of like a reed blowing in the wind. Just breathe deeply on all bodies and move. Now gradually bring yourself to stillness. Root into your legs, your posture upright. Breathe deeply down through your diaphragm. Feel your belly pushing out gently against your hands as you inhale. Pulling in gently as you exhale. Take just a moment here to stop. One last deep breath in. Let it out nice and slow. Your hands drop naturally to your side. Open your eyes. Just shake it out. How do we feel? Good. It's good. Does everyone feel a little more relaxed? Maybe a little more open. Maybe a little looser. I think these physical feelings, relaxed, open, loose, these are the qualities we try to cultivate in good prayer practice. Whether it's sitting still in like quiet meditative prayer, or walking in nature, or even you can have a seat if you're comfortable, or walking in nature, repeating our rosary. But that feeling of peace and tranquilness, I always associate with the feeling of God's presence. When you're just okay in that space, and you know that you're everything. Does anyone have any questions for me? Now I give a really awesome presentation, but yeah.
I don't have a question, but I wanted to, I guess, I'll offer, I guess, another exercise that we did, but that you can actually kind of think about in a different way.
Sure, please.
So stillness, the last one when we were kind of still.
Mm-hmm.
I once took a class where someone came in and gave a guest dance kind of instruction, and we were instructed to do the world's tiniest dance, which is staying still.
Yeah.
But you can just kind of, it's not even to one, right? It's not even to yourself.
Yeah.
But in that stillness, you can almost pay attention to the slight movement that is instilled in that.
Yeah.
Which is also, something that's very interesting and very cool to experience.
Yeah.
I just wanted to offer that up to you. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that perspective. Because it's really hard to be completely still. There's
Yeah.
always something moving. Yeah.
Just a comment that I like what you said about, when you bring, and you can push all your concerns and things down through your legs into the ground, and it's sort of like grounding yourself.
Yeah.
But that's a wonderful image, and that really helps to visualize.
I'm glad.
And just another little story.
Please.
Back late 80s, early 90s, maybe, we'd gone to visit the Rothko Chapel for the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And we're sitting there, and this man was up in front, and he was kind of going through all these dance moves. At first I thought, how weird, how embarrassing, you know? And I kept kind of sitting there and watching it, and then all of a sudden it dawned on me that he was dancing before God, and it became very, very beautiful. But that was the first time I ever experienced something like that.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I appreciate you pointing out how the physical movement helps you feel that sense of grounding. And I think that's a really important thing to note is that like we have bodies that move, right? And often our minds and spirit can take cues from that. I started taking voice lessons about a month ago. It's always been something I've wanted to learn. Not going to sing anything for you, it's still a work in progress. But what I've noticed with my voice coach is that if I move my hand with my notes, I can match it a whole lot better. I'm asking like, why does that work? He's like, I have no idea, but it works for just about everyone. And so we can take cues from our own movement to help generate specific sounds or feelings or qualities within our own body. Try it the next time you're doing it in church. I didn't want to hit that really high note. Yeah. Any other questions, comments, thoughts, experiences?
I'm talking
Yeah.
about the community of Santiago. We've walked much of it,
Yeah.
and it's a wonderful thing to do.
How long ago did you do it and what was your experience like?
It was great. It's just your soul sort of comes with you, and because there are a lot of the history that's there,
Yeah.
and there are not a lot of people on the trail, but everyone who is on the trail is a special meaning.
Yeah.
Special meaning. And so, and you pre-book it. You have everything organized for you.
Right.
So it very touches your soul.
Thank you for sharing. It's on my bucket list. I think maybe it needs to be a little older before I make a hike 12 to 15 miles a day. But we'll get there. Anyone else? Closing thoughts, comments, experiences?
Just thanks for bringing this practice to the church environment and, you know, I have a meditative practice, but it helps me connect it to my faith a little bit more, having this session today to think about it that way. Coming into presence in the different ways that we can do that and that's a form of prayer.
Yeah. My pleasure. You know, I've always believed, you know, we always talk about church, that God always wants relationship with us. And God will take any means or excuse necessary to get into that. So whether it is a more traditional Western Christian practice or a not so traditional Christian practice, God's waiting. And as soon as we open the door, present to be with us in that place. So thank you for sharing. All right, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. I'm going to be hanging out in the courtyard at least till Maeve's done with Sunday school. So if you have any other questions, comments, thoughts, or just want to chat, you can find me up there. This coming Wednesday, Cantor Ben is doing singing as a spiritual practice. And then again, on Sunday next week, he'll be leading the forum for a little more depth in that. I definitely encourage you guys to come out next week for Cantor Ben's presentation. Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of your day.